We're honored to acknowledge that Propeller Art Gallery sits on the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Huron-Wendat. We understand that Propeller Art Gallery operates on land that is governed by the Toronto Purchase Treaty 13, the two-row wampum treaty, and the Dish with One Spoon treaty. The gallery also operates on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. We are committed to peacefully sharing and caring for the resources around the Great Lakes and operating the gallery on the principles of inclusiveness as we continue to exhibit art created by artists from all around the world. My name is Lisa Johnson, and I'm one of the coordinators of our guest curated show, along with our gallery director, Tom Taylor. Thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to introduce you to Ilene Sova, our 2023 guest curator. Ilene has been a joy to work with, from developing the theme of the call, selecting the works from a large number of selections, helping to install the works, and penning a brilliant curatorial essay, and as well as planning today's event. For this year's exhibition, we were particularly happy that Ilene chose the critical and timely themes of urban futurities. These issues are close to Ilene's heart as an artist and activist whose art practice focuses on equity and diversity with a feminist focus on creating a dialogue around anti-oppression. Ilene is also heavily involved in arts advocacy, community activation, and curatorial projects that promote pluralism in the arts. Ilene is the founder of the Feminist Art Conference and Blank Canvases, an in-school creative arts program for elementary school students. She also holds the position of Associate Professor in Drawing and Painting at OCAD-U. In fact, our relationship with Propeller and Ilene goes back to the early days of COVID, when we co-created a virtual OCAD-U GradX in 2020. I'm thrilled to welcome all of our exhibiting artists this afternoon, and sorry, that's the end of my statement. I want to introduce you to Ilene, who's going to be leading our panel discussion. Thank you.
I have to say, I've been doing arts admin projects with community partners for about 20 years, and this has been a pleasure as well. There was no drama, no egos, everything was just very smooth and lovely, so thank you for that, because it just made it such a stress-free experience. I really, really liked working with Propeller. So, as an extension to the land acknowledgement, I just want to talk a little bit about my philosophy of this show and why I curated the show in this way. And when I think about the way that I look at community projects, I always think about this quote from Maggie Hutchinson, who talked about decolonizing in her report to the Ontario Arts Council. I think the report was in the year 2000. And she talked about how colonization separated community from artists. So artists used to be integrated in the community pre-contact, and art was made with community. And it was, artists were considered purveyors of community. And what colonization did was really make art capital, right? And separate us from community. So whenever I curate a show or I think about my art activations, I always think about what's important to community and how can artists reconnect with community through that project. So that's always my philosophy in thinking about how to decolonize the way that I work and the way that I think about my arts administration. So at the time I was thinking, what's really important to people right now? What are people talking about when I run into friends on the street, when I go to a dinner party, when I'm reading the newspaper? And the main thing people were talking about everywhere I went, every day, was this city just being really precarious, and housing being unaffordable, and artists being pushed to the margins. All of these issues were just coming up again and again and again, and I thought, what if we could do an art show that could activate these ideas, and we could really think through, in a positive way, some solutions, and also just what are people thinking and what are people feeling, but through a creative kind of vehicle. And I was so pleased to get these amazing, amazing artworks that each speak about something different, but somehow are in conversation with each other, I hope you all think that. So I'm going to introduce the wonderful artists I asked to come up here, just to ask some very specific questions, but I'm also going to lob some things out to the audience and just try to create like a, like a living room salon kind of discussion vibe, rather than a very academic, formal, like talking heads panel vibe. So Beverley Daniels, in the end here, encountered mixed media while studying at Ontario College of Art and Design. However, she chose to focus on painting, making occasional forays into mixed media. Over the past 10 years that she has worked primarily in collage and mixed media with occasional forays into painting. She has shown her work in Toronto and in Melbourne, 2 cities that have kept her art brain alight. She lives in Toronto. Yeah. Carly Friesen, here on the end, is a Toronto-based artist and nonprofit professional who makes art that explores social change, existentialism, queerness, and joy. Carly uses her art to move through the big, overwhelming feelings that inevitably come with being alive. And she loves to invite others into her art practice. She aims to find the silly in the serious and to make other big feelings and make people feel less alone in this world. She works with mixed media, textiles, and digital design. Kezleigh, thank you, correct me if I say anything wrong with pronunciation, is a Canadian new media artist based in Toronto. She attended the first integrated design course in 2017 at the Halliburton School of Art and Design. She specializes in digital painting, self-expressing herself by way of dreams and memories, often featuring bright colors and abstract shapes. Her work has been featured in several publications and has been shown in galleries internationally, including 20-something group exhibition at Propeller in 2022. And then Helena Wehrstein is a self-taught artist based in Toronto and Hillsborough, Ontario, breathing new life into stuff that is unused, unwanted, and discarded, which is her passion. Her relationship with this discarded material is ambivalent. She is appalled by the overconsumption and planned obsolescence that produces it, but at the same time inspired and by the art of possibilities of material that would normally be thrown out. Helena has exhibited her work at the Toronto Outdoor Art Fair and exhibited her work in studio tours and group shows at the Petroff Gallery and Propeller Art Gallery. Right. Okay, so that's an introduction to our esteemed panelists. So I wanted to start the discussion by just asking a very broad question to all of you about why you applied to the call. The call went out about a year ago, I guess, maybe 9 months ago. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's been a long process. Wow, together. And we had come up with this call, and I was thinking either people are going to have work or they're going to make work because they're inspired by the call. So I'm always like curious what happened. Did you see the call and say, I have a piece already, or did you see the call and said, oh, I'm inspired, I'm going to make something new based on that call? So why did you apply? What inspired you? And how did that process kind of happen?
I'll start, sure. Well, my piece on Leave It Yet, I already had it. I actually made it when I was at the Artist Project in April this year, and I was sitting there in my little booth and I was making this artwork on my tablet because I'm a digital artist and that's what I do. And the piece originally was really about how far I had come as a person, as an artist, all like the things that a person could endure up until this point. And that's what the piece was really about. But as soon as I read the little blurb about this exhibition, that piece was in my mind throughout the entire thing that I read. So that's pretty much why I applied.
Yeah. Do you want to tell them which piece is yours?
Oh, yes. So my piece is already there, yeah. It's in the next room. It's like the piece that has like the hands in front of their faces. It's on acrylic glass. We should have like a little presentation.
Yeah.
So you can just this is what it is. But yes, it's in the next room.
Yeah. And And I really like that piece because it kind of spoke to this idea of monuments, which we've been seeing getting pulled down in urban centers all over the world as we rethink our relationship with empire and colonization and race and diversity. So that piece really stuck out to me as something that really spoke to me as a symbol of this idea of, in order to exist in this city, in the state that it's in, you almost have to be in this delusion and not look and not feel as you're walking through the streets, because there's just so much chaos and pain and that we see just from getting from point A to point B. So these statues with their hand in front of their face, and they kind of look like statues of liberty, but in a new contemporary way. And yeah, so when I saw them, I was just like, oh, this is so perfect. Yeah, so wonderful. And in terms of the optimism piece, I really liked them because of those bright colors and those patterns, and you feel like there's some kind of hope or future, like that future is in
like the stars, and then
yes.
it really sort of like communicates that sort of like looking up and like hoping for the best, or like wishing for the best.
Yes. Anyone else want to jump in next?
Sure, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I only heard about the call in June.
Oh, wow.
Francis had invited me to be part of the Salon 17, and so I applied, and I said, well, I'll look through the Propeller. I didn't know much about the Propeller Gallery. I looked through, and there was another, and I saw that, and I'm like, I have a piece. I have a piece. And actually, that's mine there, the one with the rabbit ears. And I did that actually in 2016. So I've been thinking about these issues for a long time.
Wow.
Wouldn't go into that later, but yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think for me, the piece spoke to this idea of sustainability, but also like it's a little city inside of a box made of upcycled materials. Like, especially when, again, we're walking around and seeing these kind of ticky-tack condos pop up out of the ground seemingly overnight. And what are they made of? And they just seem so rickety. And, you know, I know people who are interior designers, you know, and go into these spaces and they just say it's the cheapest materials, like the closet doors are falling off, the cupboards are falling off. And then you see this and you think about how could we be doing this more sustainably, and thinking about the, you know, my Indigenous colleagues had taught me about the 7 grandfathers and thinking 7 generations ahead. And we can even think about, what are the state of those ticky-tack condos going to be in 20 years, and 10 years, and 15 years, right?
Talk about planned obsolescence.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
That's, you know, do they build things to last anymore? Anything? Well, we try, this was. Oh, I should just say one other thing too. The other thing that I was inspired by that, you know, by your blurb in the call was, I have a friend who's an artist who's been bumped off Sororan. There's a whole bunch of artists there. Somewhere in Dundas West, somewhere else. Lower Ossington, which I just drove down now, and it's like just cafe after cafe, right? Who knows what the property value is. And now he's up Lansdowne somewhere, you know? And he's been part of this, you know, this downtown condo business.
I've been using this metaphor of grasshoppers in my mind, like artists have become grasshoppers, like these big jumps, and they can only stay there for a certain, and then they jump. I have a colleague who told me in the past 20 years he's had to change studios 15 times. And he finally just said, I've had enough. He bought a house in Markham with his wife and just put a studio in the basement. And he said it was breaking his heart every time because he built community and he would get to know the people in the neighborhood, and then his studio mates, and then again they'd have to move. And I was like, 15 times. I've had to move 3 times in the past 5 years, but 15 is
That's enough in 5 years.
Okay.
So I made my piece in response to the call. I've worked, like Ilene said, my day job is in the nonprofit sector, and I work for a number of housing charities. So the first thing that came to mind for me was, like, how do people live in the city? My piece is over here. It's the one that says Co-op Housing Now, and nonprofit housing now. I left nothing to the imagination. I have a plan and it is going to be told to the masses. But yeah, it was like thinking about the future part of it and looking forward and thinking about, you know, we're here now, but how can we get out of it? And to me, it's like, it's so clear there's such specific things that folks in power could do. It's not that, I mean, of course, it is deeply complicated, but at the same time, there are these like immediate solutions that we can look towards, and pretending like it's overcomplicated is almost a tool they use to keep us asking for crumbs, when it's like, pass laws, make this possible, get funding for co-op housing, get funding for nonprofit housing. There are concrete things we can do to make the city more livable for artists and community groups. So I wanted to be very direct and action-oriented with my response. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I really, when I came across Carly's piece, I got so excited because in my call it did say thinking about solutions, but a lot of artists went really deep into the dystopia. So I was excited to see this one and be like, okay, there's a little breath of solution-based approach. And also, we'll talk more about the materials I was really excited by in the next question. But yeah, just having that there as like a reminder, very simple reminder to everyone that, yeah, and there are cities around the world who've come up with solutions, but there doesn't seem to be the political will, or there's too much money, right, exchanging hands, and yeah.
They say there isn't enough money, actually, there's too much money.
Right, that's such a good point. So do you want to talk about your reaction to the call?
When I saw the call, I have a series about cities. I've always loved cities, and so I had a whole lot of them, and many art makes me happy. So they all were kind of happy looking things, but this one was a bit sadder. It's got this one little face in it, and the rest is just grids and bits of advertising and stuff. So I thought I would use that one because it seemed, even though the palette is bright, there's a kind of sadness to it, and I think that's kind of what I was responding to in your call. You know, to think about the crisis that we're in, and I mean, I can talk more about the composition later, about how that fits into what you were asking for. But yeah, I did have a piece. I did have it already, but I chose it amongst several because it answered the call best.
So for the other artists who are here, who are in the show, how many people just had a piece already? I'm just curious. You both had pieces already, and then you responded to the call. So the next question is about materials. So you can see like a few of my friends that attended the opening said, oh, such a diversity of materials. And I thought that was really a integral part of experiencing the show, is that it's so mixed media, there's so many creative uses of materials and approaches. So I wanted to have a question about that today, and ask how the panelists thought about the materials being connected to what you were trying to communicate about urban futurities, and how you saw that like as a creative inspiration in your process.
I thought quite interesting what you said about capital, separating the arts from community, because I did start, when I was doing this series on cities, it got started because I was looking at packaging. I was avoiding doing a commission.
I know that feeling.
And I started taking things apart and thinking, okay, these are packages, and that looks like a building. That looks like a frieze. That looks like, you know, fenestration or whatever. And it struck me that manufacturing and marketing is all what the city seems to be about now. Like cities can be about more than that, but that's very much what we're about. And it was very interesting that packaging and things like that would look so much like architecture. So I began to just, I think that's part of the, you know, links my thinking about cities and the call for the submissions. But how those two things were linked. Then I thought it was so interesting what you said about capital, because you nailed it. That's what I've been trying to take apart. Capital gets in the way. And I guess capital and colonization are like this, right? They really get in the way between artists and the community, because most people that I grew up with, and many people that I know, they don't even think of buying art or even going to look at it. They think it's not for them. They wouldn't have anything to do with it. They feel a bit intimidated by it. And that's the sad part about it, because if that wasn't true, we probably wouldn't have the kind of problems that we're having with artscape. They're all connected.
Yes. Yeah. We'll talk about artscape at the end. I'm like, as if this happened while the show was up. So timely. Okay, so.
So my work, digital work, is just so, it's already sort of urban, because my work is all new media, it's digital painting, and what I do is I use digital paint, I use photographs, I take photographs with my phone, and then I have it all in one file, and then I send it off to the printers, and they UV laser ink it onto like acrylic glass. So it's already very urbanized in my mind. It's already, like the glass that I use is actually just a thinner version of what they use for skyrise buildings. So it's already very urbanized. And when I saw this question, I was like, it's just meant for the show. Yeah.
And at the opening, and we were here, so many people were approaching. How did you do it? How did you do it? All these artists are just like, I want to try this.
It's a very like I tried to find this method for like a few years, and I finally got it down to like at a state where I'm like happy with it. But there's always more development to come. So.
Yeah, we were talking about huge.
Huge, huge, and like, well, I was also talking about like thermoforming, so like making the image kind of pop out, which will be really cool.
Sculptural.
Yeah, very sculptural, for sure.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I use, at this point, if at all possible, everything that is junk that could be thrown out. So that is like the rabbit ears, Probably a few people have rabbit ears in the basement from like 40 years ago. That's some old box, I can't remember, and obviously all the motherboards of devices that have been discarded that are now obsolete.
Oh, really?
Obsolete.
Yeah.
Yeah, old phones, I don't know, various things that are obsolete. And it just, when you put those together, it just looked like this urban condo, big box kind of environment. And I had fun. And I am really based on, a lot of my ideas come from what I have in front of me. So whatever junk I get, I'm inspired by that. And okay, what can I do with this? There's certain themes and ideas that are always running through everything, but it's usually the materials. Okay, but how does this speak to me? And so out came that, and then I was thinking about your question. I was thinking, disposable stuff. Get rid of it, and people, and sort of thinking about how, how to put it, but in our society and in our city, especially the inner core, people are becoming disposable. They're artists, or I should say, not everybody. People of lower means and less power.
So it's like a double metaphor. It reminds me of, I used to work at the Drake Hotel years and years ago. ago, and I worked with a guy whose day job was at Sony as a help, like, you know, when you call your DVD player's broken and you call. Yeah, and my DVD player broke, my Sony DVD player, so I was like, oh, I'll ask him about it when I go to work. So I said, oh, you know, my DVD player broke, and he said, oh, how old is it? And I said, oh, it's 2 years old, and he said, yeah, it's designed to break at 2 years.
Oh.
Because that's when the warranty ends, and I was like,
Oh.
it's just, you just throw it out.
Yeah.
Phones just
Yep.
make garbage.
Yeah. It's really the same thing as like your iPhones. Yeah,
Oh.
they all have like one of those kill switches where it just kind of, and then they start like getting slower. They start, I don't know, messing up. They start just turning off on you, and it's just like,
Yeah, so it's built in, it's baked in,
it's
not,
built in
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah. It makes me think of that social justice quote, it's designed that way.
Mm, yeah,
You know,
the
like-
system's not broken.
Yeah, the system's not broken, it's designed that way.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I used a bunch of old materials as well. The co-op housing now actually underneath it has the first painting ever made that I actually liked. And it felt like it was a style that I had moved past, and even though I still was so happy I loved it in that moment, I was like, maybe it's time for it to become something else. And it felt so perfect with this call to be reusing materials. So many artists can't afford new canvases, even if they don't want to do it poetically, they have to paint over. I know I'm not that old, but I budget with paper and pencil. And I have tons and tons, I don't know, I'm always trying to make sure I can not, go broke, so I'm budgeting all the time. I have pages and pages of it. So I use that on both of them as the background, so I Mod Podge my budgeting notes on there. Those are real, those are how I am able to stay living in the city, by budgeting all the time to make sure everything can, get to the end of the month. And I used a lot of materials from the dollar store. I used paint from the dollar store. I used glue from the dollar store. I tried to make it like a piece that could actually, could I make 10 more of these? Could I afford to actually make this? I feel like artists don't often really admit how it's very expensive to make your art. The process of making your own art is in of itself something that's becoming more difficult. I don't know, you go into the art, the paint is so expensive now, and so I was just okay, I'm gonna make this affordable for myself, and everything that I used was just the cheapest material I could get my hands on. And it kind of in a way made it more a fun process, because I wasn't as precious with, you're okay, mixing up the colors, oh, that's a crappy color, okay, wait, let me try again. There was a little less preciousness with the materials, which felt, I think, actually made the creative process a lot more fun, maybe what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I hadn't spoken to you, and I was looking very closely and seeing these kind of anxiety-filled numbered notes in the background, and in my curatorial essay, if people read it, I talked about this kind of person who's trying to make the mortgage payment, or seeing if they can make the mortgage payment, or just constantly redoing the numbers, and you can see that in the background. But something I also kind of was inspired by was the 12 by 12 size of the one piece. So the idea of the square foot. It seems that we're all victim to the square foot, the capital of the square foot that's in the sky, right? It's air, and it's the square foot of the floor is what is actually pushing people at how much value that square foot has. I remember, talking to a developer who used to own a studio that I was in, and he said, oh, I can't afford it per square foot anymore because artists are this much per square foot, and commercial lease is this much per square foot, and the square footage for an artist was this much, so I would lose $27 per square foot, so I can't have a studio, that's how they talk, right? So when I was thinking about the size of your piece as well, it's a square foot, that it's so oppressive, and you see it on all the big billboards that you're walking right to, it's per square foot, a commercial lease. And the more value that has, it determines everything. In my neighborhood, a lot of families are in these tiny condos with 1 bedroom and children, because it was cheaper for the, well, I mean, condo developers make more money by making single units for single people. No urban planning, no thought process around the fact people are gonna have children. So only because of the square foot value. Like they don't make as much money off of a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom condo. So they didn't make them. So there's entire condos that don't have multiple bedroom units. So it's dictating everything, the way we live, the way we interact with our children, our families, where people stay, where people move within neighborhoods and community. So I think that's really interesting. Like maybe that's not, you were probably like, oh, I have a square foot. Like you.
I had a spare foot. I was like, well, I don't have to buy something new.
Square foot is a metaphor for,
Yeah,
all this stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, you do see a lot of square foot shows. I wonder if, I don't know, somehow that people are picking up on that.
Unconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah. Okay, I'm so involved in this discussion that everyone spoke, right, on that question? Yeah, we all, yeah, okay. So this question is about thinking about solutions. So often artists are considered society's forward thinkers due to their ability to think outside the box and look for solutions and solve complex problems in new ways. When you think about the challenges urban centers face, what do you think citizens or leaderships need to do to create thriving, healthy cities for the whole population? How can we use art to help translate these ideas? This is a big question.
It's I think one of the biggest questions that we've had. that I was really thinking about, and I don't know if I have any solutions really for you, but I think as like a collective, maybe we can all just sort of like think about it. So my answer to this question was, I grew up not in an urban setting. I grew up in a really rural area, about 2 hours north of here in Muskoka. But when I moved down here, I noticed I noticed one thing that was sort of somewhat similar, and it was homelessness. And I spent a few years when I was 16, 17, homeless and, well, semi-homeless. And the experience obviously was not great, but I think the one thing our leaders could put more effort into would be like awareness. And when I say awareness, I don't mean like privilege awareness, because a lot of us have phones. A lot of us have like phones and tablets, but when I was homeless, I didn't have a phone to look up where to go. Or like even like a community center that was open at like midnight to go. So what I think leaders should do is really put their efforts into like sorry.
Like
It's,
access?
yeah, like to have awareness, but not like privilege awareness. Like have some sort of, like, and I don't know what the solution for that would be, but some sort of awareness that is getting to where it needs to be.
It might help if we had more people in power or positions of some influence who had experienced precarious housing or homelessness. But I know Olivia Chow, she and her mother are kind of precariously housed for a while, and I think she probably has her finger on the pulse more than many do. But I wish that we could make it possible for more people who are less well off. Because most people who are, if you look in the backgrounds of most city councilors or MPs or MPPs, they're pretty well educated, they've had pretty secure lives. And I think this is what you're talking about, to be aware in a more visceral way.
Yes.
From experience of some sort.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know how we make it possible, more affordable
Right.
for people to run for
Yeah,
office.
but like at least talking about it. Talking about it gets you there, like step one.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I was certainly going to say that, electing people who are not like are elected right now. You know, people who are progressive, you have progressive ideas is key. It's absolutely key, I think, you know, to
But also, as a progressive, getting your ideas out there, because the right seem to basically almost take some of the left's ideas and twist them around, and then basically repeat until it
What
becomes
about
a
Doug
thing.
Ford, who's for the people?
Yes.
I see red when I see that.
So we have to be almost better than they are in terms of getting our message across, because we don't seem to. It's like, yes,
Well,
we do
we
great
haven't so
things,
far.
but then it's like, you need to basically bullhorn that out there.
Yeah, so the question is how? When the media is owned mostly by, you know, I mean, there's a lot of sort of alternative media, but who sees it? You know,
Yeah, just-
mostly the people who already have those kinds of ideas.
That siloing effect.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of how, this is how we kind of get it out there.
Yeah,
Through
so
our-
you
through these.
start,
Yeah.
and hopefully,
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to bring it back to sort of what my piece really means. It really asks, like now it was, before it had a certain story to it, but now it has a bigger story to it. And now that I've looked at it, now that I've been through this exhibition, it really asks the society as a whole, is like, are we really doing our best? Like, are we really doing our best? Or are we just buried in our phones while the world kind of burns around us?
well, a lot of people are, you know, the ostrich syndrome. You don't want to see
And that's what these are. That's what these are. You're
what's
just,
out there.
and I see a lot of people walking around town passing a lot of homeless people just on the phone.
And what about the problem where, you know, we have to, so many people are sort of on 24/7 now. So during the evening, they're getting requests from work.
Oh,
And
yeah.
things about things like this.
Yeah.
And it's busy, and they're gossip at the end of the day. It's another-
And that's by design as well, I think. It's like
Probably, yeah.
people constantly on the treadmill going faster and faster, and they're not going to realize that the earth is burning, there's homeless, there's this, that, and the other, that we need to take care of.
Not to get too into policy weeds, but I will say two things that I think are, as you said, sort of the like outside of the box solutions. One that I always think about is a city-state model. So for example, in Berlin or in Germany, cities that get to a certain size have the same rights then as a province or a state. So cities in Canada are considered creatures of the province. They can't income tax people. There's tons of things they have to go to the province and say, pretty please, can we take care of our, you know, the people that live in our cities? Whereas if we were able to become a city-state, the cities above whatever population level we decide would be able to function at the same power level as a province. So they could tax their citizens, they could do all kinds of things that we don't have the option to do.
And the province
That's a
isn't
good one.
going to allow that.
Of course. But that's where but that's why I really think, like, you know, that's where that art is activism, like, you know, to say with your art, obviously that's like how I approach it. But the other thing I'll say, just as like a call to action, if you are in Toronto, Progress Toronto is my favorite nonprofit that's working on building a better Toronto. I think they do some really cool things.
Can you say that again?
Progress Toronto. Yeah, they helped to get Olivia Chow elected, and they're really focused on housing, education, like the things that really matter
So
most.
maybe Toronto should secede from the province.
Around
Around Toronto.
You have my vote. Yeah.
But there are a lot of progressive and good things happening out there. I have to keep reminding.
I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna, but I'm like, there's
But I have to
better
keep
solutions.
reminding myself,
Yeah.
because I tend to see the box half empty as opposed to half full. But, you know, I keep trying to remind myself, okay, there's people working. There are a lot of people working.
And something about working is that, on things like that, is that whether or not you win, and it breaks your heart, it doesn't you don't win, but you keep going because to work on something makes you feel less bleak about it.
Absolutely.
Yes,
It is, yeah, it's like, it feels like a need, like it's how I survive in the city, yeah.
There are solutions, we just, for some reason, there isn't a political will
Mhm.
to act, or maybe as a public, we're not putting enough pressure to get the politicians to act. I know the Liberal Party had a 3-day retreat on affordable housing, was it 2 weeks ago? And they came out and said we didn't come up with anything.
Oh,
Not kidding. What they could have done is listen to us and bring
Yeah,
people
right.
in who are experts and who have experience to get some ideas. Okay.
Before you go to the next question,
Yeah.
I'm really curious how people think artists can
Oh yeah, that was the end of the
make
question.
a difference,
Yeah.
because I don't know the answer to that one. I've been thinking about it, so like,
Well, lobby City Hall, I don't know if you were there with, I worked with Joyce Whelan way back in the 80s, and we lobbied City Hall. We would go to meetings and we, raise our voices and do all that stuff. And out of that lobby, Artscape came about. Yeah, so, I mean, there were some positive aspects, but we used to lobby that the city needed to purchase a building outright for artists. And that way the city would own it, and then the artists would pay their rent and basically own the building outright. They went the Artscape model, and how that turned out. So there is stuff that artists can do to lobby, and it does take a lot of time, and letter writing, and all of that. But being present at City Hall is a big thing.
Yeah, I was part of the consultation process on the Creative Hub tax. Do people know about that? When they went through-
Oh, yes, when there was like 1%
No, this was after that one. This one was like if you had a building with artists in it, you would get a 60% off of your property tax. And so you just had to prove that you had public programming, that artists had a fixed rent on their studio for 5 years or more, and that you had over, I think it was 70% artists in your building. You could get 60% off. It's still there. It's a policy. Yeah.
You're kidding.
So it was to encourage developers who had buildings with studios in them to not tear them down and develop them, because they could basically land bank and get 60% off of the studio that I was in at the time when I was in the consultation process. The property tax was $60,000 a year on that building. So 60% off of that was quite a significant amount of money for the owner, and it was encouraging people to keep creatives in there, or if you had a building, to allow it to be rented by.
Then you're always still dependent on the
Yeah.
landlord.
It was based off something they did in London, England, and it came out of activism from 401 Richmond. Do you remember when they reassessed 401 Richmond, and then property tax was so high that they were going to have to close it?
It was called highest and best use, it just meant the condo.
That the condo, how much would this square footage be
Which is just
on that corner if a
Yeah.
condo was there? Well, that's what they based the property value, property tax on. And so the artists really were active around that case, and they allowed that property tax bill to go down by 60% for this. So it still exists, so if there's anybody out there owning big buildings in the crowd, just let artists into your building, you can get 60% off your property tax. Anyway, that was a creative solution in a way, to address that, keep 401 Richmond going, and then encourage other developers to do the same. And I think that's a lot how a Kin is able to get in to the buildings when they're empty before development. Because often when the developers buy the properties, they don't have any intention of doing anything for 15 years, 10 years. And so this is a way they can make a little bit of income from rent, get some property tax off, and then artists are in there. But it's still like the grasshopper thing where, okay,
good job, yeah.
here's a lease for 3 years, they're gonna make a condo in 3 years, but you can be here at this low studio rent for 2 or 3 years, and then you hop off into another one. Yeah, and that's why you see a Ken popping up in all these different locations. Yeah, that's what how that happened. So this is a kind of fun question. I asked the panelists to talk about another piece in the show that they really were inspired by, and talk about how it was in conversation with their own piece. And yeah, I'm really curious about this one, about you, what you all thought.
For me, it was Ruth's piece. It's actually that piece on the wall over there, made of scrap pieces of cloth. And I know in your artist statement, you said that your grandmother made like rag rugs, and so did my grandmother. And I immediately was very drawn to this piece. As soon as I kind of rounded that corner, I was like, I'm really interested in this piece. And I love how it really incorporates like pieces of like scraps that you probably would just throw away. I really like the waste not, want not, which is what the name of the piece is called. I wrote down the definition of what scrap meant, and it's to get rid of something that is no longer useful or wanted. And I think you use those scrap pieces and you made something that someone would want again. That's why I really like that piece.
Well, I was going to, there were two. There was Ruth's piece, and I mean, I loved them all. But that big Walmart photograph with the little person at the bottom. Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't think I need to say anything more. It's just, it's such a statement.
And stark.
Stark, yeah, that wall of consumption.
And the person's so small.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just how you're on the treadmill. Somebody was saying the treadmill, it was you, Peter. And your step earns you a bit of money that you spend at one of those places, and it's just like all part of the machine. It's really, really nice.
And I think I picked that piece also because it made me think about the pushing out as well, because I'm also from a small town near Muskoka. I grew up in Aurelia. So I grew up in a very rural area as well. And when I went back like mid-2000s to visit family one time and walked down the main street, and it's just dead because the box stores are now on the outside, right? So you have everything getting pushed out and killing the center of the urban area. I mean, it's revitalizing now because there's kind of this movement of more of a gentrification of the main street. So there's wine bars and bakeries and upscale cafes and espressos and all the stuff that wasn't there when I was growing up.
hardware store or anything like that.
No, and they're currently bulldozing the entire waterfront to build condos. And I'm like, wow, it's just like Toronto. Yeah. First come the espresso cafes, and then the next thing that goes is a condo. A developer told me that he goes throughout the city, and he says whenever you see an independent coffee shop pop up, start buying around there.
No.
Yeah.
So they make little businesses take the risk and do their research for them.
It used to be galleries. Galleries are coffee shops, but he told me, oh yeah, that's what I do. I just drive around looking for He said it's a surefire way to know that the real estate value is going to go up. Okay, so.
Okay, well, I couldn't come down to one. The downsizing just got me on, but not to do with my work particularly, but just, that's the stage I'm in. And it was just really spoke to me on that. But in terms of,
Oh, this is the floating half chair piece that is in the corner. Photographed so well.
But in terms of my work and related, the Walmart one and the one with the old guy, because I live in Osage and Bloor.
Yeah.
We now have a Walmart in Dufferin Mall. We have a Shoppers Drug Mart on Bloor Street. So my little local pharmacy is struggling, and Walmart is now selling food, so the little local grocery stores are struggling. My wonderful Strictly Bulk, you know, is struggling. You know, the cheese shop is gone. You know, there's several small stores that we still, I've been there for a long time. So those two things, the Walmart and the guy looking out, you know, out the street from these old houses, it's like both of those. It's like, okay, yeah, that's my hood.
Yeah, that's an iconic image.
Mine are, I also picked two, but they're right here. This one and this one both felt like what happens when we don't have any co-op housing, when we don't have any, like when we don't have affordable housing. This is where we end up, you know, desolate streets, just chaos, and I mean, housing. We've seen what's happened in the last few years without it. It just, cities get really dark.
Yeah, I kept thinking when I was going through the slides, because it was a blind jury, I didn't get to see anyone's name, it was just like a number with the image and the artist statement. And I was thinking about, who is this for? Like, I keep thinking, what's the future? Like, is there any thought of the future even, or is it just about now, and that capital that's driving everything? Are they ever thinking long term about, because there isn't enough people with that much money to keep this propped up, so then what happens? Like, is anyone thinking that through? Or is it just about, what can I make, how fast I can make it? Yeah. Okay, so the last question, because we're almost up with our hour, is, and we can lob this out to the audience as well. So we are obviously having this conversation in the shadow of this terrible news that Artscape has become insolvent. And we all know that if they don't find a solution to that situation, we will be in an artistic fabric that is completely different. And I'm just wondering what people are thinking about that in the light of urban futurities and thinking about the future of the city and what we could imagine, especially so thankful that somebody's here who was there at the beginning when it was even conceived of. And this gallery is in Artscape building, so it's all very topical. I ran a residency at Artscape Gibraltar Point over the summer, and we just got an email saying, bank account's frozen, you're not getting paid. Oh yeah. And I feel like I'm so at the bottom rung of people who've lost money, especially the people who worked for Artscape, right? All the workers who just lost their jobs. And I'll point people to their Instagram post from last week if you haven't read it. They didn't get severance pay, they didn't get 2 weeks notice. They didn't even get warned that this was going to happen. They just got an email saying your job is gone, don't come into work. Bank accounts are frozen. So I know that the powers that be are scrambling and having emergency meetings to try to come up with some kind of solution. So I thought we could all talk about that because it's so, it's happening right now. And just here, I would just love to hear what people think. Yeah. So if anyone in the audience wants to speak, or anyone here. Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about it and how, you know, I guess there's some lessons here, but I think they lost their vision, and I think it was potentially, you know, how the board of Artscape, had lofty goals, and they lost sight of the original roots of, providing affordable housing, and spending something like $25 million on a facility down on Queens Quay that is basically bankrupting the rest of Artscape. But you know, like that thinking, and what we're talking about is how people at the grassroots, you know, this disconnect happened over time, and I think in the 2010s, over that whole decade, you know, the board came up with these lofty goals. They wanted to capitalize it somehow and create something great and grand, and now they're destroying it, right? So it's again another example of that shift, and how, you know, how does the society of Toronto keep that from getting taken away? You know, when these great organizations start at the grassroots level, and they work well, and then it gets to this level. I mean, why does that happen? I don't know, but
Well,
then
I
the
think it
second part
happens
is,
because there's a lot of ego involved, and as
Yeah.
the former chair here, we met with the CEO a number of years ago, and he was more business, hard-nosed person, and it was kind of shocking to me because it's like, well, you're supposed to be representing this, non-profit arts organization, and yet you're using the Bay Street language on monetizing this, that, and the other thing. And it was just like this kind of weird disconnect.
Oh, so you noticed it then?
Oh, yeah, like this was a few years ago, pre-pandemic, 2015, 16, when Joseph and I, we met with him. But the thing is, it's like I'm the glass half full. I'm hoping that Artscape will basically shrink down in size and come back to that original mandate.
So still as Artscape or a different?
I don't know if it has Artscape or not, but I mean, they're going to have to sell quite a few properties in order to get out of the hole that they've dug themselves in.
I think you're really right about the boards, though. I think a lot of nonprofits have boards made up of lawyers and doctors and business people who have absolutely no expertise in the nonprofit community building or artistic spaces, and yet they're the ones who can hire and fire the CEOs. And inevitably, what they do is they'll hire a team of VPs that are from the business world who have made their money and want to give back now that they're all rich.
And
They have no
it's also good
expertise
on
in
their
the nonprofit
resume
world.
to be part of the arts community.
Yeah.
So you do have these very entrenched business people
Yeah.
who, that's their mindset, and that's what they're going to bring to those boards.
And they don't think, at least in my experience, I find a lot of them don't understand that managing community groups, nonprofits, artistic groups is an expertise.
Yes.
That is a special knowledge set that you don't have. There's not a lot of humility in it. They're like, oh, it's cute.
Right.
Yeah.
They've gone
Yeah.
to law school, so they're the
It's like-
greatest thing to, to land
And it's
on.
like, oh, I'm an actress.
Yeah. And they're the same people who go into government. Right? So I think it's all those guys up there.
Yeah.
So we all have to run for.
Can we co-run?
But the other part is then again, looking forward is what can we do other than, well, yes, we can write letters to the councillors and mayor, which we do. Propeller is doing, has done. But then beyond that is that what can we do? Can we sit in meetings? Can we meet with the councillors and have meetings and discuss all our concerns? I mean, we have to convey to them the importance, because otherwise it will just be left to their own devices, and our voice won't have any impact. So that's what I grapple with, because it's so important to Propeller. We've been here almost 10 years, and it's a great spot for us. We help our artists, our own artists, but also the community here economically and artistically. So that's the thing that we want to try and find a way to make a difference. So we've talked about it in basic form so far, but I mean, think of all the others that are being impacted. It would be great if everyone could get together and find a way to communicate, as a group. So.
Well, I think at our last board meeting, I mentioned Hamilton Artists Inc. However many years ago, they were in a similar situation. They had, this little space. But what they did was they did a lot of fundraising and research, and they bought their building. So we tried here, when we first moved into this building, Joseph and I spoke with the CEO of Artscape. Can we purchase this building, or this space? Because you're already paying, like when we were on Queen Street, it was almost $5,000 a month. So it's like, that's just going to a private landowner. So could we use our monthly rent to purchase? The answer was no, because the condo developers were giving extra floors, because Artscape was part of it, and this space is the community aspect of Artscape in this building. So they couldn't sell it. They would have to maintain it as a community hub. So that's why we couldn't purchase this space, right? But now it's gotten so unaffordable that you can't find a doghouse that's, you know, for less than $1 million here. So kind of that train has left the track. But I mean, I still think it's possible if you find like a really decrepit place further along and then purchase it. Because otherwise you're always at the mercy of landlords and city people, and you're, you know, every few years you have to move.
Yeah. One of the, this is just a crazy thought, but I know the city is trying to make it, has been making it possible to put in laneway housing and garden suites in backyards. It would be good if they could give that same flexibility for studios. In, you know, if you have some backyard space, rather than, like I thought about it because I had a studio in this distillery with Artscape and then turfed out. And then I got a studio at Cape and Danforth and then Metro Links turfed us out. So I was thinking, okay, try to build a little place in the backyard. What if you could do more, like a studio space for more than just one artist and maybe a bunch of people in a neighborhood with those little laneway studios or, you know, backyard studios.
But artists too, I think, have to think in a business-minded way. Because we were in a building on Dundas and Ritchie. It is now the Feather Lofts condo. And it was for sale for $450,000, however many years ago. 6 stories, big, huge. So the artists in the building got together and we were trying to purchase that building. So we were, you know, we had the lawyer, we had the accountant, we had the artists. But then slowly, bit by bit, and it only meant at that time a $10,000 investment. What was heartbreaking was that slowly artists got cold feet and they pulled out. So we needed 10 artists in order to do it, and we didn't have that by the end of the meetings and this. So I mean, we're shooting ourselves in the foot as well if we launch these initiatives and then don't follow through. And that building now is worth like millions.
But like,
condos.
when you think of it, how precarious income can be for
But
artists.
you always have a place, you always need a place to live back then anyway. And a studio space, and you're still paying that monthly
So you
rent.
might as well, yeah.
And I'd like to interject there and say that I don't have a studio space because I'm completely digital. So maybe that's where everything is going to go.
Everybody just
I can literally be right here, right now, doing art. I don't need a paintbrush. I don't need canvases. I don't need space. So maybe that's perhaps where the future of art in the city is going to go.
Or you do
I
more
hope
outdoor
not.
installation stuff. It's just, you know,
Yeah, and
less
then maybe
social.
traditional artists can't afford to be here anymore, which is just really sad.
Or home studios, that's why.
But I don't think they want us here anymore. That's why we're getting pushed out. Like if they did, then they would,
They would make room.
yeah. I think they're perfectly fine with everyone leaving.
We'll see if I'm in there.
Yeah,
Shifts the direction.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah, I really like
There's a lot of pressures.
Yeah, and no money.
Yeah.
I really like that the Artscape workers did say in that post, we want to be at the table, and they were asking for a meeting because of this very point that people who aren't experts, as Carly was saying, or have real experience are not at the table. And this is also why you have the Liberal Party coming out of a 3-day retreat and saying, we have no people. Yeah, but when
That
we
just seems so weird to me. How can you
Yeah.
not have one
I know.
idea?
Go to
for
Google.
States?
Yeah, see what the people are saying.
Because there's so many
Doing
things
wonderful
happening
things
in
in
Europe too,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
for artists.
Yeah.
The wine was too good, Nate.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope that, I'm feeling optimistic too that there could be something coming out of, like something new and refreshing coming out of, like, even though it's a crisis, maybe something new will come out of it, and it's making people think about why artists need to be here, and there's so much discussion in the media, so, yeah, to end it on a positive note. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.